Grandmaster Nightfall Gilded node has launched in Destiny 2, which means all GMs are available to those who have Conqueror previously unlocked to gild your Conqueror seal for this season. And with that, we have access to the newest GM added to the rotation, Heist Battleground Moon. I'm Sneak, and this is a guide for the Heist Battleground Moon. If you enjoy this breakdown, a sub, like, or a comment would be appreciated, and it goes a long way. And now let's get into the guide. First up, what should you bring in this GM? Aside from the standard 100 resilience for damage reduction, I believe it's in your best interest to bring 1 void resist, 1 sniper resist, and 1 arc resist. The first 2 mods are particularly for the Scorn raiders / snipers, so they no longer have the ability to one-shot you, and the arc resist is there for the high portion of the fight, as well as Abominations and some Score Chieftain. For team composition, I think any combination of Warlocks and Hunters works fantastic in this GM. Sorry, Titans. Hunters in particular work well in the tough portions of this GM using Deadfall Tether, along with either Orpheus Rigs or Falcons in combination with the Retrofit Escapade, which is what you'll see me using in this footage below. Now for Warlocks, you guessed it, Well of Radiance yet again is the flavor of the week, and your top 2 exotics will be either Cenotaph for the ammo purposes or Phoenix Protocol to get your well back very quickly during the Horde sections of this GM. As I mentioned, any combo of these 2 is fine, whether it's 2 wells and a tether, 2 tethers and a well, or maybe your third player is feeling a little spicy and can play on Strand Hunter or Arc Warlock. I do believe that Arc Warlock with Vesper Radius can be a good pick for this GM, along with Chaos Reach. However, in terms of guide purposes, going with Well of Radiance is definitely the safer choice of the 2. In terms of weapons, these surges are Arc and Strand, so your heavy slot, you can opt into using things like Hothead Rocket, Song of Your Youth Machine Gun, or Storm Chaser Linear Fusion. But it's not entirely mandatory to run Arc, as you can see that I'm running a full Void kit and doing just fine with Retrofit. Your other slots should be related to stunning the 2 champion types, in this case, the Barrier and Unstoppable champions, and you should try to match the Arc affinity if possible. Some great choices for these are going to be Witchender, Arbalist, Riptide, Rufus's Fury, Techian Force, Iterative Loop, and Sweet Sorrow. Additionally, if you have a Cenotaph user on the team, you can opt to use either Divinity for an extra weaken plus ammo, and then Path of Least Resistance for the same reason for ammo, but also you can use Shoot the Loot to scoop up ammo when you need to. Now let's talk about the GM itself and strats on mechanics and positioning. We're going to be breaking this down in 3 parts. Part 1 is the very opening of the strike, Part 2 is the Ghost Scanning section, and Part 3 is the boss room itself. Starting off at the very beginning, the first tip out of the gate here will be to position your fire team at the top right of the opening arena. This allows you to have the high ground on all the initial spawns of Hive that you will have to deal with, in which includes a few barrier champions as well as a couple of wizards and some Arc Boomer Knights. From here you can safely eliminate threats one by one or blast through them with rockets if you want. It's fairly simple. Once eliminating most of these initial spawns, Zebu's Death Tongue will spawn into the arena, and you should shift your focus on that immediately and nuke that Acolyte as fast as possible to avoid the Shrieker taking away your abilities. Once the Acolyte is downed, it's business as usual. You'll have a few more Knights to spawn in along with the Barrier Champion and a regular Orange Bar Ogre, and once you've eliminated those, you will get a huge wave of enemies spawning directly to the top left of your positioning. In this scenario, a combo of Tether and Heavy Weaponry or a Damage Super can be pretty nuts here and take out all of the enemies, which include a few Barrier Champions and an Unstoppable champion, so make sure your champion stunning is on point here and take advantage of that tether if you have one. After those are dealt with, the final enemy will be a large Hive mini-boss to kill. Now, quick note here, make sure that you kill that enemy last as you down champions first. Otherwise, if you kill the boss too early, the champions will despawn, and that will lock you out of getting platinum for your completion. Finally, after the enemies are all gone, make sure to pick up that heavy brick that's in the strike for you to get for free, and head into the war set afterwards. Skipping right to the ghost section here, in this room, enemy control is going to be your key to victory. Your goal here is to stay in one position and not to get overwhelmed, and not put a lot of emphasis on clearing the Scorn away from the console to progress your timer. Your job is to clear threats first, and then finish the scan afterwards. In my experience, your best option in this room is going to be parking your fire team down at the front middle of the room, and just to avoid confusion, the front middle of the room is the opposite end of where you would start the ghost scan to start the encounter, and not literally the middle of the room. Once you are in this position, the only concern you have is watching for periodic spawns of enemies coming out of your doors to the left and the right. Most of the time, it'll just be some trash mobs. However, during certain points of the ghost scan, you could have an Unstoppable champion spawn near you, so stay alert on those spawns. Speaking of these Unstoppable champions, they are tied to spawn in 2 at a time at about 25% for each ghost scan, so 25, 50, 75, and in total you should be fighting 6 Unstoppable champions, along with the big boy of the encounter being a big mini-boss Abomination. In short, you should be cycling your supers like Well and Tether throughout this fight when the big waves of enemies are spawning in, and in my experience that is roughly every 20% followed by 2 champions shortly after that. The last thing I like to touch on in this room is the stoppage of the ghost scan. This happens when the glowing yellow scorn or a champion gets near that ghost console. This is both a good and a bad thing. It's bad for obvious reasons. However, this can also help you because of similar reasons on how you finish the first room. If you happen to hit 100% before all the champions are defeated, your platinum is again at risk. However, if you have an enemy blocking progress at the scan, you can use this to your advantage and kill what you need to kill and leave that scorned enemy up for last. That way, you can ensure that you do not finish the encounter without killing all these champs first, so you get your platinum at the end. Just thought I'd throw that in there in case people are wondering why they might be getting gold. Finally, we have the boss room. Now, I know that this is going to be brought up immediately, so let's talk about the cheats. As with other Heist GMs, my stance on this is if you want to do it to get your Conqueror done, go for it. But for me personally, I don't find enjoyment in sitting in a cheat spot for 20 minutes just to get my clear done, and I'd rather teach people how to conquer the GM, no pun intended, normally, and that's just my 2 cents on the matter. You can do what you'd like, though. That said, to open the fight, if you have your well or tether before activating the console, be sure to use it and then scan the console to get a free extra super back. The boss fight will begin, and you'll have some enemy spawns along with the boss in the center of the arena. Tether goes really nicely here in this scenario to eliminate the enemies while you're shooting the boss at the exact same time, while you're sitting in your safe Well of Radiance. Get the boss and our enemies down as much as you can before your well timer runs out, and then it's time for the first tip of this fight. The first tip I like to give for the boss room is a simple saying: left is death, right is safe. This room may look like it's divided pretty evenly, but from my experience in the boss room, positioning on the right-hand side of the arena is significantly better to deal with everything in this boss fight, whereas the left side has lots of open-ended spaces and gives most enemies a free angle to shoot you or toss a bunch of grenades at you, so in other words, avoid camping the left at all costs. Now, as for enemies, you're going to be dealing with a lot of Raider snipers and some Scorn dregs, or whatever those jabronis are called. Try to prioritize the Raiders first, as they're basically the only enemy that'll be a threat to you in this room, even more so than the boss himself. Once you've eliminated enough of the room to give yourself some breathing space, proceed to get the boss to the 50% health mark. This will trigger the immune phase, and much like the other Heist GMs, you'll be tasked with dunking 5 relics into the console to break the immunity shield. You should deal with the enemy waves that spawn when the health hits 50% on the boss. You will be greeted with a bunch of enemies. On top of that, you will have 2 unstoppable champions to deal with as well. You can choose to either defeat them from a distance or feel spicy and go pop a well in the middle with a tether, and then go to town on them immediately just to get them out of the way. Once you've dealt with them, or if your well timer has run out, retreat again to the right side of the arena, and for this portion, it'll just be a battle of stamina in downing the chieftains for their relics while also keeping the Scorn snipers down to dunk those relics. Invis Hunter is great here, as it allows you to pick up relics and walk in freely to the console to dunk, and Gerfalcon Hunters can use Invis on demand through volatile kills, as every time you go invisible, your next retrofit kill on a chieftain will allow you to give a new invisibility timer, or maybe if you're using like commemoration, same thing. After you've completed the Relic Dunking portion of this fight, it's pretty much just you versus the boss and some periodic enemy spawns to deal with, but they're not a big deal or a big threat. Other than some leftover chieftains from the previous phase, there are no more yellow bars to spawn in, or champions that'll spawn in. It's just you versus some trash mobs and the boss himself. Continue to utilize the right side of the arena and smack the boss down to whatever pace you'd like. Down the boss, and you've completed the Heist Battleground Moon GM. For what it's worth, I think this is a fun GM to run, but I also think it is the easiest of the 3 as well in terms of Heist Battlegrounds. And that's not to say this is a breeze of a GM, because if you're caught sleeping in the job, you will get punished, but I think the other 2 are a little more balding, if you will. Anyways, I hope that this guide has helped and you've enjoyed the video. If you'd like to see more, consider hitting that sub button and leaving a like or comment to help the channel versus that YouTube algorithm. You can also catch me streaming runs of these at twitch.tv/SneakyBeaver. Come on by and say hi. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.